And celebrating the resurrection of our Lord and Savior.
You do more than anyone should. And in time you'll see
take you away.
how much better off you'll be. And don't you believe what he said? Look up inside. I be a mirror, reflect what you are.
In the beginning, the internet seemed good.
I wanted to write it. I started writing it in the summer of 2017, finished it.
To show that you're home when you think the night has in your mind.
Al Festival Primera Persona i al Centre de Cultura Contemporània de Barcelona us donem la benvinguda amb aquesta conversa amb Gia Tolentino dins del calendari del festival d'aquest any. Hi Gia, welcome.
Hi.
Really nice to meet you. I'm going to make a brief presentation of your work and yourself. Rebecca Solnit says that you are the best young essayist in the in the United States right now, and also Sadie Smith adds that your book, Trick Mirror, Reflections of Self-Delusion, is a whip-smart book that filled her with hope. Natalie Portman encouraged the reading, and also Kaya Gerber, Supermodel of the Year and the daughter of Cindy Crawford, told about last week in her book club that reading your book was like taking 20 years of philosophy classes in just one book. I mean that this diversity of and enthusiast readers that you have, I think that reflects perfectly the cultural and social impact that you have in the press right now with your book and your work, because you are from Canada, but you are been living most of your life in the United States, and currently you are living in New York because you work for the New Yorker magazine. But also Gia Tolentino has been like one of the most prominent voices in feminist blogging during the past 10 years in places like The Hairpin and Jezebel. And from self-optimization to American scammers, or how the dysmorphia has affected our bodies because of the internet, Gia Tolentino combines the first person with clarity, humor, and gives like a structure to these strangest times that we are living. So Gia, welcome.
Thank you. That was so generous and so nice. Thank you.
No, I think that this is like the reflection of your work, and this is like such an inconvenience because you must come to Barcelona, but we can't because of the pandemic. But you planned to go to Borja to see the Ecce Homo, because in the Spanish version of the book, that this one in your book author photo, we can see. That's you right, here, and I think you painted it.
I painted it myself.
Yeah.
Ecce Homo is really one of the most important works of art in the whole world to me. I sometimes think, I'm so sad that I can't be there in person, but you know, in a way I find it really, almost really moving that it's like we're talking to each other from epicenters of the global pandemic right now, you know, and we're still able to speak. Like I find that really kind of amazing. I was, like I've been speaking to some journalists in Italy and Spain recently, and I keep hearing your sirens in the back of the interview, you know, and it's, I guess I'm so grateful that at least we can talk like this. But yeah, I've never been to Spain ever, so excited. And the thing about Ecce Homo is that, you know, I write a lot about the internet, and I write about how the internet is in a lot of ways set up, you know, its financial incentives are destructive, its surveillance capitalism is destructive. But every now and again, I'm like, if it wasn't for the internet, I wouldn't know about Ecce Homo, you know? Like there are some things it's like, maybe it's all worth it just for, you know, something that's like every time I think about it, I laugh. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I remember that it was also in Saturday Night Live. It was here from Spain. It was like worldwide.
It's so good.
So now you are upstate New York, right? You are like self-isolation with your partner and Luna.
Yeah, I feel really lucky. I feel really, really, really lucky to be outside of the city right now. I've been up here for maybe, I don't know, 40 something days. And yeah, because this book, I wrote a lot of it. I would like rent little rooms on Airbnb upstate because I wrote this book mostly on weekends. And so I would take the train 2 hours north of the city and work all weekend. And then kind of like after maybe a year after I sold the book, we bought a house up here, and it's very peaceful.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Because I remember that Valeria Lucelli told like she was in the Bronx and she was listening like all the sirens that you told, like talking with the Spanish and the Italian reporters. So it's quiet there than in New York nowadays.
And I just feel so lucky to be able to walk around outside, you know, like it's just not, to be able to walk.
And also you are pregnant. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's nice to, I'm 22 weeks pregnant. I'm starting to waddle around like a duck, you know, and I feel, you know, I don't know, there's so many things right now. Like I feel so conscious of the sort of arbitrary good luck of having a job, being able to work at home, you know, still getting a paycheck, you know, and something like life is so different for people with children and people without children right now. And I feel really lucky that, you know, I've got like a fetus instead of a baby that requires active childcare, you know? Like I think, you know, life would be very different if I was trying to work with a kid or two around.
But you didn't expect that when you got pregnant. So, and I remember that I read an interview with Leticia Blanco in El Mundo where you say like being mother nowadays, and especially during this pandemic, and trying to think about being mother, it's like kind of leap of faith, right? It's like, I mean, it's quite, I don't know if you have like mixed feelings about it or.
I have hugely mixed feelings about it. I mean, you know, I think that all my life, I have been afraid of what, even just in a feminist sense, of what having a child signifies in terms of, you know, domestic roles and, you know, just, I really prize my independence, even my, you know, my bodily autonomy, right? Like I was always a little afraid of this as a turning point in which sort of, especially in America, structural inequality really comes down on you. Like we don't have paid maternity leave. We don't have universal health insurance. We don't have subsidized childcare. Like, and I think, but especially right now, I mean, I think it, you know, leap of faith is a very generous way to put it. It's almost, it's a real act of almost optimistic delusion to have a child right now. Cause I mean, I think so often about, you know, just in terms of climate change, like it was something that I really had to think through with myself, you know, if the odds are good that your child's generation is going to have a completely different understanding of the natural world, right? And of weather and of disaster and of crisis, and you're willingly producing children that, you know, will they be able to have kids? Like, I don't know, like, will human life last more than 100 years on Earth now? Like, I really don't know. And I feel a lot of guilt about that, you know, and I feel like I feel very strong mixed feelings, but I think there was something about it where I was like, I guess, you know, like the fundamental truth of human existence is that there's something about life that's worth living no matter what, almost, right? And there was like kind of really confronting the edge of like that guilt and fear and realizing this is something that seems worth doing anyway. You know, that maybe it's just like a totally ridiculous biological imperative that I'm not resisting, but yeah, so far I've been like, I was afraid of pregnancy. I thought that it would feel like a loss of autonomy, but mostly it feels cozy to me so far.
Yeah. And you're keeping like a food diary during quarantine. I saw that you tweeted like a food diary about
Well,
what
I'm just eating so much. Like I already eat so much. I'm like a big eater, but especially in early pregnancy, I was just like, I literally could not stop eating. I was eating like a full meal every hour, which was great. But I was like, how, like, this is out of control. Like I was like eating my whole fridge every day. It was, yeah.
No, it's a good time to lose control, maybe.
Yeah.
We can start talking about your life, and I think that one thing, one of the sentences that I really like in the book is in this when you went to reality television in Girls versus Boys Puerto Rico in 2003. You were 16 years old, and one of the partners in the reality says to you that you said during this the recording, I don't want to get famous for this bullshit. I want to get famous for writing a book. So you knew when you were 16 years old that you want to become a writer. Why in the first place you went to the reality, and maybe you were thinking like this can be great material for my book, maybe?
Yeah. Well, you know, this is something, like when he said that to me, I had no recollection of saying it, and I was like, oh fuck, like, you know, when you realize you've always been like predictable, you know, or something. But I mean, I went on that reality TV show. So when I was 16, I had spent like a month in Puerto Rico filming this reality TV show. And when I went, you know, it's like when you're in high school and you're so like, you just want to get out of the house. You want to do something new. You want to be around new people. You want to like, you're so ready to be out from under your parents' roof. And that was then. I was just about to go to college. I was bored. I had been going to the same very religious conservative school for 12 years. I wanted to get out. And I needed money for college. And like, I just like, my parents had gone through all this financial trouble, and I had I was going to have to take out huge loans for college. And I was like, I could use some money. And I would have, if I had won this show, which I did not, I would have gotten a lot of money. And I think, you know, the question of whether your life is material or not, it's one that I feel kind of conflicted about. Like, I was in the Peace Corps, which is, you know, this program, right, where you, like, this kind of imperialist program where America will send, you know, 20-somethings to go volunteer for 2 years in a, you know, in a faraway country. And I did that. And like one of the guys I volunteered with who hated me was like, you just did this for material. And I was like, no, I mean, like, what I want is the interesting experience, you know? I want that more than the writing about it. But it also just so happens, like, I want to learn more than anything, you know? I want firsthand experience. Because it seems to be like one of the great privileges and pleasures of being alive, right? Is just whatever, newness. But it just also so happens that the only thing that I can do well is write. And it just so happens that I just write about everything. And I always have, like, since I was little. And so everything, I mean, not everything gets turned into material. Like, there are certain parts of my life I've never written about, but what I wanted more than anything was the strange experience, I think.
And after Kyrgyzstan, you went to Kyrgyzstan with the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
It's like a program, I think, that was founded by Kennedy, right?
Yeah.
And in one essay you write about it, and you talk like you came back to US with mixed feelings about it, like this kind you were talking, and how was that? Because how do you value this kind of lab year, maybe going there and trying to help?
Well, the Peace Corps was, I mean, I'm still really close to the woman that I taught school with. Like, she taught me a lot about teaching. I mean, I taught with this incredible woman named Dinara Sultanova, who had taught herself English at age 40, like just from a book. Like, there were no English speakers anywhere. And she had fluent English by the time I met her, which is astonishing. Like, to teach yourself that at 40, I mean, she was incredible. But that experience was maybe the first time that I grasped in a visceral way just the vast differences between, I don't know, good intentions and actual results, when I sort of understood that like true systems of power were, you know, like, I don't know, just the sort of gap in scale between individual effort and actual collective action and change. And I think, but in a lot of ways, this period, quarantine, has been so much like Peace Corps, except easier, because it's like back then I spent most of a year in a room, you know, but I had no internet and I couldn't go to the grocery store, and, you know, I was shitting in an outhouse, like in the backyard. And I think when I came back, I remember like the first time I walked into a grocery store, I just burst into tears, you know? So I was like, how is it possible? How is it possible that, you know, I can be on the receiving end of this sort of supply chain abundance? Like, how is this sort of, like, I was both so grateful for and so panicked by, like, the state of capitalism and like consumer capitalism that I lived in. Like, I both appreciated it so much and feared it, you know, like, how kind of mighty and scary it was. But ever since then, I've never walked into a grocery store without feeling that like pang of gratitude and almost, I don't know, sadness or something, but appreciation. And
like knowing,
it's just like, how is it possible that we can walk in and like we want to make something and like we can buy the thing we need? Like I think that, I don't know, probably a lot of us feel like that now, walking into a grocery store and we're like, oh, they have flour, you know?
Yeah. In Spain it's the same. You can find flour.
Yeah.
You found it. And also I want to talk about the Repentagon, because you were born in Canada, but you spent like 12 years in Houston, in Texas, where these mega churches, and your families are evangelical, I think. So you went to one of these mega churches in Houston, that it was so big that you and your friends call it the Repentagon. And I think like the biggest church is like with 800 people inside, with big TV screens and everything. And it's quite the opposite in Spain. We don't have this kind of churches.
It's so American. So 5,000 people inside the building. I mean, it's like a sports stadium. I mean, that's really what it was like.
And I don't know how has shaped your inner moral, like growing up in this ambient, and because everything was inside the mega church, like you have a field, you have you had a lot of spaces for this. So I don't know how has shaped you this.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I can't overstate the degree to which that influenced me. I mean, I think that I still have I've tried to maintain, like, lose the bad baggage and keep the good baggage, kind of, you know, and like the bad baggage is the like all of these horrible conservative ideas I learned growing up. And my parents are not very conservative, and they're not very dogmatic, but the church was. But one thing that I feel that it still has really shaped me is that, I mean, I still have this like obsession with morality, I think. I mean, you know, we all have an obsession with morality, right? Like, you don't need to grow up religious to have an obsession with morality. And I interviewed the writer Barbara Ehrenreich like a month ago, and she, you know, she's a fourth generation atheist, she said. And, you know, she was like, the idea is you do good not because God is watching, because no God is watching. You know, you do good because this is all you have. And I really connect to that idea. But I think what growing up religious does to you, or what it did to me, was that at the end of every day, you know, I would get in bed and I would pray that I would be better, you know, like I would go through how I had been, and I would kind of evaluate it for hypocrisy and inconsistency and, I don't know, like weakness. I don't know if that's fucked up. And I would think about ways to be better. And and in some ways, like it's like I'm now trying to figure that out through writing. It's like that impulse has just gone into writing. But I think what also growing up that way, like there was something about religion at the core of it that I loved and I still love, which is just devotion, right? Like devotion and sort of genuflection, the sort of recognition of powerlessness, and awe. Like those were things that I learned first in the church that I still really value and I'm drawn to. Just I don't find them like religiously at all, but yeah.
Yeah, but for us, I think that when we read the essay, it's like this kind of spectacular shows inside the church. Like you talk about all the money that the people were.
Oh yeah, I hated that.
And it's like it's really crazy. I mean, to think about this, and it's like
yeah. And we'd have like famous country stars, country music singers singing at Christmas, and yeah, that I hated. And in a lot of ways, like we learn whatever we learn through the earliest prisms that we learned them through. And my church was a really, really good lesson. Like it taught me over and over in many ways. Like it was like the Bible seemed to me to be very anti-capitalist, but the church was an extremely capitalist institution. Mm-hmm. And the difference between that was like an early fixation of mine. I didn't understand how this could be possible, mm-hmm. And my sort of repulsion at the sort of, Southern Baptist, like George W. Bush, like big money, religious conservatism. I hated it. And it took me a long time to understand why, but, in a lot of ways, it's the same sort of thing that I'm still thinking about.
Mm-hmm. And at the time that you were realizing that, you also write about taking MDMA and ecstasy during these years. And you write a lot about drugs. I mean, you write about marijuana and CBD and everything. Why do you want to write about this, about the experience of drugs? Do you feel like nowadays a lot of journalists doesn't write about that? Why
so with this essay in particular, I was interested in the concept of ecstasy generally. I was interested in the way that an ecstatic experience mm-hmm. was something that connected, like early religious mystics to, people doing drugs now, right? Like there was a way that ecstasy connected virtue and vice mm-hmm. that was so central to what I was thinking about, which is like, I stopped believing in God and I started doing drugs and I didn't feel like anything had really changed. And so that was the question that made me write that essay. And so to write about that, I had to write about the feeling of ecstasy. And then, I had like, you have to write about the drug itself. It was too like perfect that there happens to be a drug named ecstasy that I started doing when I was a teenager, right when I was switching. Mm-hmm. But I think, with like drugs as a category, I wouldn't say like with weed in particular mm-hmm. and with something like ecstasy or something like acid, or mushrooms, mm-hmm. like these are things that I think should obviously be legal. Mm-hmm. Like these are things that are not, they're misclassified. With acid and ecstasy and mushrooms, it's like they don't have addictive patterns. They don't, like there are other strong drugs. They're, I wouldn't say to everyone, do them immediately, but, like these are things that have been used throughout history to access, like they've been really formative to me and my understanding of calm and the world, I guess. And I think like they should be able to be used in therapy,
and you write about drugs with a lot of sense of humor. I mean, I think that it's necessary that to talk about this kind of drugs in this way.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, I find it, I just, like drugs are important to me. Like they are. And like my brain, I need to do acid once a year and clean it out, nice spring cleaning in there.
Yeah.
And I think, that there are a lot of people, adults, journalists, like there are a lot of people for whom this is true. And I'm just not good at hiding things about myself.
Yeah, and a lot of people are, because you write about drugs like in a recreational use, but there are a lot of people that are taking drugs for work. So I think it's different what you try to explain with this kind of use of drugs.
Yeah.
And I really like also the essay of Pure Heroines when you recall the experience when you were in third grade and you were playing with your friend Alison, and your friend tried to play with, like, you have to play with the yellow Power Ranger. In the essay, you talk about the problems of identification with our heroines in cultural and literary, like most of the times they are white and Caucasian, and how you had, like, when you feel it for the first time, when your friend told you, like, the anger of knowing that this kind of, and I don't know how has been going, because your parents are from Philippines, and I don't know if you worked with this anger. How have you worked with this anger during your life?
Yeah.
And if you feel like in the USA, it's like a kind of a lot of diversity. But we had like this problem also with the virus, like the Chinese virus and everything, and it's quite for Europe to see that it's quite astonishing, because there's a lot of cultures and everything. So I don't know, how did you work with this anger and knowing this?
Yeah, I think, the anger part of it mostly, I sublimated it. Like I think what I did pretty soon after that, and I think this is one of the reasons I was writing the essay, because I was trying to figure out my relationship to representation generally. Because for a long time, my point of view has been like, it's important, but it's not a driving force in my consumption or production. Like I think what I loved about literature, and what I still think is true about literature, is that, it is a mechanism for you to be able to inhabit anyone's life, right? And to me, it's like that sense of identification, that sense of porousness, identity porousness, is like the reason that literature feels so amazing when you're little, right? It's like you can step into the life of, someone who's, Laura Ingalls Wilder or whatever. Like anyone is welcome to be her, when you read that book. And the idea that actually people would undo the mechanism of literature to be like, actually, this is a white character, and I think I was confused by that as a kid, because I was like, the whole point of fiction is that anyone can feel like anyone. Yeah. And then I understood, and then like, but I just kind of disconnected from the idea that I needed direct representation, because it just wasn't possible. Like there were no Asian characters anywhere, like anywhere on TV, in books. And if they were books about like being Asian, Yeah. And, like it was like a movie like Mulan, where every single Asian girl was like, got told, you look exactly like Mulan. And I was like, it's because there's one Asian character in all of pop culture, Yeah. And so I just, I disconnected a little bit from the idea of representation in a way that I think was harmful. Like I think I should have, like I was really moved by the example of the Milan Women's Bookstore Collective, this feminist collective that, they engaged really directly with reading these stories and treating these fictional women like their own mothers, and like pushing against them, and being willing to sort of really engage with what was missing and why you would feel shut out of a certain narrative. because of race or class or sexuality or whatever. Like in a way, writing that essay was a way for me to re-engage, like being like, I actually do want to see myself in some way, and trying to figure out what way that was.
And in the essay also, you recollect the words of Simone de Beauvoir talking like being married is a hoax. And also you have an essay later talking about the wedding craze that has become before coronavirus, because now in New York, I think that...
I know. Now I'm like, I miss weddings. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about your Excel sheet that you have with your like recollecting all the weddings that you are going. I don't know if you have nostalgia nowadays for all of these weddings that you were.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think part of the reason I wrote that last essay about weddings is like, I mean, I also think that like, for a long time, right, marriage as a sort of legal, you know, doctrine was a hoax for women, right? Like it was coverture, you know, it was, but, you know, at the same time, it's like, I'm a straight woman. I've been in these monogamous relationships for the last half of my life. I flinch against the sort of like all-consuming economic like behemoth that is like the wedding industry. But I also love weddings, you know, like there's a reason that we've been invited to like that. I've got 55 weddings on my spreadsheet is because they're fun. And like, I like going to them, and I like, you know, like love is moving and, you know, whatever. And so like, I like each individual wedding. I just think that the difference between, like I'm fixated in a lot of ways on the difference between the representation of something and the thing itself, right? I think that's part of my interest in, you know, the internet, or even with church, it was like the representation of morality versus actual morality, the representation of happiness versus happiness. With weddings, it was like, this was a representation of commitment that seemed so different from commitment itself. That gap was really, really interesting to me. The wider it got, the more expensive it got. But yeah, I was supposed to go to 3 weddings in May, and now I'm like,
no. Maybe by Zoom, because in New York it's allowed now to get married by Zoom, right?
Yeah. But you know, it's like, but again, as we're realizing, it's like Zoom is fine, but it's nothing like being able to be with each other and like have a real drink and like say cheers and like, you know. And I'm hoping that, it's like, you know, we all miss our friends. It's like, I would love to, like, you know, I haven't put on a real bra in weeks, you know, like I've been wearing slippers for like, you know, like I think I need, like, it would be nice to get dressed up and see all your friends, you know.
A lot. In Spain, next Saturday we can go by walking to and have like a little bit of sport.
Kids were just let out in Spain, right?
Yeah, yesterday.
Those poor kids must be so, like, I can't imagine being a kid right now. Like, oh yeah. I'm glad that they're out.
It was, I think it was perfect. A lot of people were talking like it was a little bit crazy, but I think that after 47 days, it was...
Feels like 47 years though.
No, I want to... And I want to talk about the feminist blogging, and because you were working at Jezebel and The Helping, that for a lot of digital writers, it's like the golden era of feminist blogging. And nowadays we have like all of this big corporation that has included like Vertical with feminism and feminism mainstream. And it was quite different writing about feminism 10 years ago than now. I think that has changed a lot. And I don't know, how do you value? Do you think that is a good sign, or maybe we have a lack of, I don't know, the sense of humor maybe that it was like 10 years ago?
Totally. I think that I would say that primarily this is a good thing, right? Like, I think that within the last 10 years, and I mean, I feel really conscious of, you know, my whole career is because of the way that feminism was at first, you know, this new, robust, online ecosystem, and then it has taken its place as what it should be, which is like a primary mainstream viewpoint. It's not it's not a niche thing. It's not a special interest thing, right? Like I felt it especially with coverage of Me Too, right? With Weinstein stuff, it was very clear that a feminist perspective was very much in the mainstream now, and we needed that. Like that without that sort of implicit foundation within mainstream newsrooms, like everything would have been different. Like at the same time, like I think the lack of sort of life and humor and the kind of informal friction that's missing now, to me, that has less to do with feminism and more to do with just independent publishing generally. Like it's not just the feminist blogs that have disappeared. It's like all in the States, like all blogs have disappeared. And in 5 years, it's going to be like, 4 newspapers and the Atlantic and the New Yorker, and that's it. And that's a huge tragedy. And I even like, as someone that has jumped ship to like a very stable institution that I love being at, it's a shame. Like when there are no places where what I really valued about that ecosystem of blogging generally, and I was an editor, I wrote a lot, but I was mostly an editor, is that, people who had never written a piece before, like there were places for first-time writers to try things, and they could be read by a lot of people, and there was a lot more just freedom and experimentation. And it's not possible anymore. And like, young writers, I don't know where there are so many fewer places where they can do that. But it's, so to me, that's a problem of like Facebook and Google and the way that within the last 5 to 7 years, they have begun sucking up all of the advertising revenue that should go to, websites themselves. It's almost impossible to run an independent website, but yeah, I miss it so much.
Yeah, we miss it too.
Yeah, I mean, like the New Yorker will never be as fun to read as like something where a 22-year-old can just write whatever the fuck she wants. Like, yeah.
And now everything is with the metrics. So this fixation with the metrics, it seems like quite impossible because if you don't have the metric, it doesn't get time to write it. So it's crazy. And I really love in the last post that you wrote in Jezebel, you wrote about I never linked to Jezebel, but and people sharing this kind. I think that you refer it because how people reflect to Gawker Media and everything. But in Spain, we have like quite similar option with feminists and women. When women write something in a feminist blog, a lot of men says like this. So I don't know if you, when you came to the New Yorker, and do you have like the sensation when you say to people like, I work for the New Yorker or I work for Jezebel? I think that maybe it was quite interesting, the change.
It made me so mad. It made me so mad. Like I write pretty similarly, like I think my writing is a little like, it's cleaned up a little bit more there. Like the editing is very tight at the New Yorker. It's one way, but I'm still writing about the same things with the same point of view. And I stopped getting hate mail. I mean, I still get a little bit of hate mail, but like I got so much hate mail at Jezebel. I would write about abortion and I would get pictures of fetuses in my email, like all of this shit all the time. And I started writing for the New Yorker and it stopped. And like people would answer my emails all of a sudden, and people would, if you meet someone and they're like, what do you do? And I say, I'm a writer. And they're like, oh, what do you write for? And I say the New Yorker, and they're like, oh, and I was like, fuck off. Like, like it doesn't, the idea, I mean, I love the New Yorker and they do amazing work. And I really, really, like, I value the work of my colleagues so much, but it made me so mad that people, were always like, ugh, like your little women's website. And then we're like, oh, wow, the New Yorker. It's like, fuck off. Like,
because it's really similar. your old articles and your new essays at the New Yorker.
Yeah, well, and the idea that you like, if I would write about the same, like I write about abortion at the New Yorker, I get a bunch of respectful emails from people being like, "Wow, I've never thought about," and then at Jezebel it was just like, "Die, bitch," and it was like I'm writing the same pieces, and that did teach me a lot about how much people care about this institutional respectability that, like there's a sliver of that that's very deserved, but most of it is bullshit. And I think it also I don't know, it was so interesting that like even our by the time I left Jezebel, our readership was 50-50 male female. And it's like I bet that all of the men that read Jezebel didn't realize that there were so many other, like that experience working at Jezebel from the editorial perspective and seeing who was reading the website from where, it was like, it really underscored for me the fact that like very obviously women's issues are not special interest, right? And men are very, very interested in them because it's people's issues. Like I think even with my book, that was one of my secret goals. I wanted to write a book that was mostly about women, but that wouldn't be sold as like, here's a book about women and feminism. I wanted it to be seen as sort of a work of general cultural criticism that just happened to be mostly about women. And I think it worked.
Yeah, it worked perfectly.
Because it's like there's no reason, like these issues are. And also, as I wrote about in the book, like a lot of the sort of things that John Berger wrote about in ways of seeing the ways in which women have been made to be self-conscious of perception have been generalized to everybody through the internet. The internet has sort of turned everybody into this sort of kind of forced self-awareness of self-projection or whatever.
Yeah, and I was wondering, how do you see this with your essay of self-optimization and nowadays that we are in quarantine and we are isolated and social media, it's like one of our tools for being connected with the rest. And you, before coronavirus, social media, it has become from something really political by one hand, but in the other way, it was like a place where we sell ourselves, like we are selling our work, our productivity, and our labor. We are laboring. So do you believe that maybe it's going to change, or this stage of capitalism is not going to change? Because now social media maybe is quite different from before the virus.
I think, I don't think that there's going to be a because the thing is about the selling part, the monetization of ourselves, it's not only that we're doing it voluntarily, it's that no matter what we do, these platforms are doing it against our will, right? Like we can be just looking at Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and not posting anything, but these platforms are still recording everything that we like, everything that we look at, and they're reselling that data. So there's a foundation of surveillance capitalism that's both voluntary and involuntary. And even if we change the way we voluntarily use it, the involuntary structure is the same, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that I don't think that we will see like a fundamental reorganization unless the economic model changes, like unless, even the GDPR restrictions in Europe, like the States will never pass that. Like, I think that there won't be a real change, but it is interesting the way that, I'm loving the way that certain behaviors that were sort of modeled, like I think that there's this sort of bullshit sort of subconscious undercurrent where it's like, the whole influencing industry is built around the idea that it's sort of kind of inherently worthwhile to show off your beautiful life. That like there's something, not only that there's obviously something that magnetizes people's attention, but there's this vague idea that like it's connecting and it's like, like it's some sort of like this is good for us, and now it seems especially clear that like there's been this kind of rightful backlash against people who are posting from their mansions and being like, we're all in this together, and it's like, actually, we're not. Like, there's a way in which income inequality especially has been foregrounded by social media behavior during this pandemic that I find really interesting. Like
I think Beyonce was the smartest one when they made that all of these concerts and all the people were playing in her houses, and Beyonce was no, you're not going to see my house, and she made it like with in the garden, but not with a big garden, telling like I have a big garden. No, you won't see my house, and I think that this is quite a problem also in Spain with the people with the front yards and and being, it's not the same if you are in quarantine in one place from another one. So social media.
Yeah, and I think that, and there's a way in which like celebrities are now feeling some shame, like they're like, oh, how can I show off my beautiful, beautiful house in the middle of a crisis? And what's, it's like, this is obviously a very acute crisis, but it's like, maybe that behavior should always be shameful, right? It's like, there's always a crisis. There's always like a vast amount of human suffering against which like having a beautiful life, should be seen as an extremely lucky, arbitrary exception. And at some point it should be objectively shameful, and I mean, like at these like high concentrations of wealth where it's like, nobody deserves that kind of life in the middle of this sort of suffering. I feel like that even about having my own yard, and the discomfort that's simmering underneath all of our social media behavior right now. I'm loving it.
And people pivoting, like they don't know how to do, and you see like here in Spain, we see like the United States, because we were first during the quarantine, we see like, oh, they in 7 days they will see, because in Spain we had like a lot of people showing that, and then we see the same like place and the same situation over there. And I want to talk about Luna, your dog, because Luna is like a celebrity. I mean, she has like her own profile, and she has like in Jezebel and everything. And I don't know if you plan something with Luna. Like maybe like write a biography like Virginia Woolf with Flash or something. I don't know.
If I've planned to write about her?
Yeah.
Well, I have, Luna is almost, like Luna is, so she's, she's this 90-pound, like fluffy dog with a huge personality. And I don't know, I haven't written about her, but I actually haven't even like written for myself about her. Mm-hmm. But Luna is like, I cannot express the degree to which she is important to me. Like my boyfriend the other day on Sunday, he was FaceTiming with one of our friends about getting advice about baby gear. And I can't, like, he's in charge of that. I can't, it's like, I try to look at like car seats and I'm like, like I can't do it. The one thing that I can really imagine, like I want Luna and the baby to meet, like that's like the thing that I'm really looking forward to. But Luna is like, for a writer who is at home all the time, which has like been most of my life for the last 10 years, really, or 8, when did I get her? 9 years ago?
Because you go to the New Yorker newsroom.
No, I don't. I mean, I go in there for meetings, but mostly I'm at home. And it's like Luna has been with me. I've spent so much more time with Luna than I have with my boyfriend. It's like I've been with Luna every second of the day. Like I got her when I was just back from Peace Corps and I was making $15,000 a year and I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't think that I could be a writer. I could barely even access the conscious desire to be a writer. And, I just had this dog with me, and she's been with me through like my whole 20s and through this whole change, like in 3 different states and with all these different jobs. And it's just like every day, twice a day, she makes me take a walk and appreciate like what it's like to you know, like in a lot of ways I look at Luna and I'm like, I really aspire to be like you. Like she's always excited. She's always chill, you know, like she's always just happy to be there. Like every day I'm like, I should be more like this dog.
And my last question is like, what are you writing now, or what do you want to read?
What I want to read?
Yeah, or what do you want to write about it these days? What are you?
Well, I'm mostly. It's been nice. I don't know how you feel about this, but right now I've been so grateful for journalism as a job to give me an excuse to talk to strangers, kind of. Like it's like I feel really lucky to have an anchor into the outside world. That's my job, you know? And like, we don't have to, like a lot of my other friends, they're sort of pandemic anxiety. They have to shut it off during the workday or put it away, you know, but us, we work through it with each other, right? Like we're calling people and talking to them about it and asking them what their lives are like. And I find that really, like, the thing about writing that I like is that you can be fully present within it. I'm finding really useful right now. And so I'm just, you know, I'm reporting some stuff for work. I'm trying to read a lot. I just read the Wolf Hall trilogy and I just finished it and I'm really sad that it's over. But around like in the fall, once I was promoting the book and I was really overwhelmed by the act of promoting it. I was really overwhelmed by the sort of self-commodification that I had invited onto myself and that I was actively courting in a lot of ways. And I was trying to figure out how to handle it correctly. And I think one of the fears that I've had for really ever since I finished the book, maybe last spring, was that, you know, I've spent so much of my life producing. Like I have learned to take so much pleasure in production and to identify sort of fulfillment with production. And I feel that that's one of the ways in which capitalism really has a hold like on my soul. And it's also, it's part of that. It gets more confusing because I feel really lucky to be able to write, you know, like to be able to have a job that fulfills you. It's hard to escape that identification because I'm like, I'm so lucky to have this job. Why wouldn't I write all the time? You know?
You have time to write. I think.
Yeah.
But ever since is that you have time to write about the things that.
Yeah. But ever since that point, I've been trying to do less. And I think right now, like you know, when we all got into quarantine and everyone was like, now's the time to finally like do whatever, you know? And it's like, maybe like I've been trying to just like let things wash over me and not need to produce meaning from them. And sort of like, I've been trying to loosen my grip on like, actually after this book came out, I was like, I'm not writing another book for years. Like I think I'm trying to learn to take joy in things that are not, you know, that have no measurable output, I guess, you know? Just let things sort of come and go.
Yeah, this is a luxury nowadays, I think.
Yeah, it's a huge luxury, yeah.
So, Gia, thank you very much for your time. And
thank you so much.
Next time in Barcelona, and please next time we have to go to see Ecce Homo. You have to.
Yes, please, I'm holding you to it.
With Luna and have a nice time.
Yeah, you too. It's so good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Bye.